Aella Stewart chose her ex-boyfriend over me at our engagement party, humiliating me in front of 200 guests at the most exclusive venue in the city. She announced she was still in love with Reuben Taylor, a struggling musician who'd been chasing her for years, and walked out on our future together without looking back. The entire crowd watched in stunned silence as my fiancée left me standing alone at the altar, choosing a man who could barely afford rent over someone she thought was just another middle-class office worker. What Ella didn't know was that I wasn't just Finch Torvin, the quiet accountant she'd been dating for 3 years. I was Finch Torvin, billionaire heir to the Torvin hospitality empire, and the man who owned not just the 5-star venue where she destroyed our engagement, but the entire hotel chain where Reuben had been working as a part-time janitor. She had no idea that her devastating choice would trigger a series of events that would change all our lives forever. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The chandeliers at the Platinum Spire Ballroom cast a warm golden glow over what should have been the perfect evening. Crystal glasses clinked softly as 200 of the city's elite mingled beneath 20-foot ceilings adorned with hand-painted murals that had taken Italian artists 6 months to complete. The venue had cost me $50,000 for the night, though, Aella believed. I'd somehow scraped together the money for this once-in-a-lifetime splurge on my accountant's salary. I stood at the front of the ballroom in my perfectly tailored tuxedo, watching Aella float through the crowd. In her custom-designed engagement dress, she looked radiant, every inch the society queen she'd always dreamed of becoming. Our guests, a carefully curated mix of her friends, our families, and what she believed were my modest professional contacts, raised their champagne glasses in celebration of our upcoming marriage. Everything was proceeding exactly as planned, until Aella's phone buzzed. I watched her face change as she read the message. The color drained from her cheeks, and her hand trembled slightly as she gripped the device. She glanced around frantically, her eyes landing on me with an expression I'd never seen before. Panic mixed with something that looked almost like relief. "Ladies and gentlemen," the master of ceremonies called out, oblivious to Aella's distress. "If we could have the happy couple at the front for their engagement toast, ... But Aella wasn't moving toward me. Instead, she was pushing through the crowd toward the ballroom's entrance, her phone pressed to her ear. I could see her lips moving rapidly, her free hand gesturing animatedly, even though whoever she was speaking to couldn't see her. "Aella," called out, confusion evident in my voice. Several guests turned to look at me, then followed my gaze to see my fiancé having what appeared to be an urgent conversation near the doorway. The ballroom's acoustics were so perfect that even from 50 feet away, I could hear fragments of her conversation when she raised her voice. ... Can't believe you're here. ... Thought I'd never see you again. ... Most crushing of all. ... Yes, I'll come down right now." My father, Richard Torvin, who the guest list identified as simply Dick, regional sales manager, appeared at my side with concern etched across his weathered features. "Son, what's going on with your girl?" Before I could answer, Aella snapped her phone shut and began walking back toward the center of the ballroom. But instead of approaching me, she climbed onto the small stage where the string quartet had been. Playing background music during dinner, the room fell silent as she took the microphone. I need to say something," she began, her voice shaking but audible throughout the ballroom. "I know this is unexpected, and I know this might hurt some people, but I can't go through with this engagement." Gasps echoed through the crowd. My mother's champagne glass slipped from her fingers and shattered against the marble floor. "There's someone downstairs," Aella continued, tears streaming down her face. "Someone I thought was out of my life forever. Reuben Taylor just came back to the city, and seeing him again, I realize I'm still in love with him. I'm sorry, Finch. I'm so sorry, but I can't marry you when my heart belongs to someone else." The silence that followed was deafening. 200 pairs of eyes shifted between Aella on the stage and me standing frozen in the middle of the ballroom. I could feel the weight of their stares, the mixture of pity, shock, secondhand embarrassment radiating from every corner of the room. Aella stepped down from the stage and walked directly toward me. "Finch, please understand, Reuben and I, we have history, Real history. He struggled so much, worked so hard just to get by. And seeing him again made me realize that what you and I have, it's comfortable, safe, but it's not passionate. It's not real love. She reached for my hand, but I pulled it away. You're telling me this now? I managed to say, my voice barely above a whisper, in front of everyone. I know it's terrible timing, but Reuben just got back from Nashville. His music career didn't work out, and he's been struggling to find work. He said he came back because he realized he made the biggest mistake of his life when he let me go 3 years ago. When I saw him downstairs in the lobby, she shook her head, fresh tears falling. I can't pretend anymore, Finch. I can't marry. You knowing that I'm still in love with him? The irony wasn't lost on me. Reuben Taylor, the struggling musician she was choosing over me, indeed been working in Nashville as a part-time janitor at one of my family's subsidiary hotels while trying to make it in the music industry. I'd known exactly where he was for the past 3 years. Just as I knew about every phone call Aella had made to him when she thought I wasn't paying attention. So you're leaving, I said, not really a question. I have to. Reuben's waiting downstairs and we're going to talk things through. I can't stay here and pretend to celebrate our engagement when my heart isn't in it. Without another word, she turned and walked toward the ballroom's exit. The crowd parted like the Red Sea, everyone too stunned to speak. As she reached the doorway, she paused and looked back at me one final time. I hope someday you'll forgive me, she said. You deserve someone who loves you completely, Finch. You really do. And then she was gone. The ballroom remained silent for what felt like an eternity. Finally, my father cleared his throat and approached the microphone. Well, folks, he said, with forced joviality, I guess that's a wrap on tonight's festivities. Thank you all for coming, and drive safe. As the guests began filing out in awkward clusters, murmuring among themselves, I stood alone in the center of the ballroom where moments earlier I'd been about to toast my future bride. The chandeliers still sparkled, the flowers still perfumed, the air. And the unopened bottles of Dom Perignon still sat chilling in their silver buckets. But everything had changed in the span of 10 minutes. My mother approached me, the tears in her eyes. Finch, honey, I'm so sorry. She didn't deserve you anyway. I looked around the ballroom, in my hotel, paid for, with my money in, felt something cold settle in my chest. Aella had chosen a struggling musician over the man she thought was a simple accountant. She'd made her choice based on passion and poverty over stability, and what she perceived as modest means. She had no idea what she'd just walked away from. And as I watched the last of the guests disappear into the elevator bay, I realized that her ignorance was about to become a very powerful weapon. The game was about to change completely. 3 years earlier, I'd been sitting in a cramped coffee shop called Beans and Dreams in the Arts District, deliberately dressed in a wrinkled button-down shirt and cheap khakis. When Aella Stewart literally crashed into my life, she'd been rushing out of the shop with an oversized latte, her arms full of art supplies. She collided with me so hard that her coffee exploded across my laptop and her sketchbook scattered across the floor. Oh God, I'm so sorry," she'd gasped, dropping to her knees to gather her drawings while I stared at my coffee-soaked MacBook, which she assumed was probably my most expensive possession. "It's okay," I'd said, though internally I was calculating that the laptop contained exactly 0 important information, since everything meaningful was backed up to servers I owned. "Accidents happen. No, it's not okay. I ruined your computer. Let me buy you a new one. I can't afford it right now, but I can pay you back in installments. I'm an art student at Crescent Valley University, and I work part-time at really—" "It's fine," I'd interrupted, charmed by her frantic rambling. "I'm Finch Torvin, Aella Stewart, and I'm officially the most disaster-prone person you'll ever meet." That was the beginning of our carefully constructed relationship. I'd chosen that coffee shop specifically because it was frequented by struggling artists and people who would never recognize the face of the Torvin family heir. For the past 5 years, since graduating from business school, I'd been living what I called my normal life experiment. You see, growing up as the son of Richard Torvin meant never knowing if people liked me for who I was, or for the 9-figure trust fund that would become mine on my 30th birthday, which was now just 6 months away. Every friendship, every romantic interest, every social interaction was tainted by the knowledge that most people were drawn to the Torvin name and wealth rather than to me. So at 25, created Finch Torvin, the accountant. One rented a modest apartment in the Oakwood district, bought clothes from department stores instead of custom tailors, took a legitimate job at Morrison & Associates, a mid-tier accounting firm, where I genuinely worked 40 hours a week preparing tax returns and financial statements. My colleagues knew me as the quiet guy who brought homemade sandwiches for lunch and drove a 5-year-old Honda Civic. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The irony was that during those 3 years with Aella, I'd been happier than I'd ever been while living in mansions and attending charity galas. She loved me for my terrible jokes, my willingness to spend entire Sundays in bed watching Netflix, and what she called my adorable obsession with organizing our shared expenses in color-coded spreadsheets. She had no idea that the reason I was so good with numbers was because I'd been managing investment portfolios since I was 16. Ella was a genuine artist, talented, passionate, and completely broke most of the time. She painted abstract pieces that actually moved me, something I'd never experienced despite attending countless gallery openings where I was expected to appreciate art that cost more than most people's cars. She lived in a studio apartment above a vintage clothing store, survived on ramen and creativity, and dreamed of having her work displayed in real galleries someday, which brought us to Reuben Taylor. I'd first heard his name 6 months into my relationship with Aella, when she'd gotten drunk on cheap wine and tearfully confessed about her great lost love. Reuben had been her boyfriend during her sophomore year of college of brooding, a musician with calloused fingers and big dreams, who'd convinced her that love meant suffering together for art. He'd played guitar in dive bars while she'd worked double shifts at a campus bookstore to pay for both their living expenses. He was so passionate, she'd told me that night, her words slurred with wine and nostalgia. Everything with Reuben was intense. When he loved completely. When he played music, he put his whole soul into it. When we fought, it was like the world was ending. Sounds exhausting, I'd said, rubbing her back as she cried. But it was also ... alive, like every moment mattered. I'd filed that conversation away, and over the following months, I discreetly had Reuben investigated. The report had made for interesting reading. Reuben James Taylor, age 26. Born in Millbrook Springs to a single mother who'd worked 3 jobs to support them. Genuinely talented guitarist and songwriter, but lacking the business acumen or connections to break into the industry. After college, he'd moved to Nashville with dreams of making it big, only to discover that talent alone wasn't enough. What? The investigator had also uncovered, and what Aella didn't know was that Reuben had been working for the past year as a part-time janitor at the Grand Harmony Hotel in Nashville, one of my family's premier properties. He'd been struggling to make ends meet while playing open mic nights and sending demo recordings to record labels that never responded. The most interesting detail in the report was that Reuben had never completely gotten over Aella. According to his social media activity and interviews with his few close friends, he'd called their breakup the biggest mistake of his life, and had been planning to return to win her back once he'd made something of himself. That plan had apparently changed tonight, through our 3 years together. I'd watched Aella gradually settle into what she called adult love. She appreciated my stability, my reliability, my willingness to split grocery bills and remember to take out the trash. She'd stopped painting the intense, emotional pieces that had first caught my attention and started creating more commercial work. Pieces she could actually sell to pay rent. "You make me feel safe," she'd told me when I proposed 6 months ago. "With you, I don't have to worry about drama or chaos or wondering if you're going to disappear chasing some impossible dream. You're here, you're real, and you love me exactly as I am." I'd thought that was what she wanted. Stability, security, a love that didn't require her to struggle or suffer or wonder where her next meal was coming from. Tonight, I'd discovered I was wrong as I stood alone in the ballroom after the last guest had left. I realized that Aella had never truly seen me. She'd fallen in love with Finch, the struggling accountant. Safe choice. The man who represented everything Reuben wasn't. She'd convinced herself that mature love meant choosing practicality over passion, security over uncertainty. But when faced with the choice between comfortable love and the chaotic intensity she'd shared with Reuben, she'd chosen chaos. What she didn't understand was that she hadn't chosen between a poor accountant and a struggling musician. She'd chosen between a billionaire pretending to be middle class and a janitor, pretending to be an artist. The difference was that I had the power to control the narrative of what happened next. And Reuben was about to discover that sometimes the universe has a twisted sense of humor about timing and consequences. My phone buzzed with a text from building security. "Mr. Torvin, your guests have departed. Should we begin cleanup, or would you prefer to handle the ballroom personally?" I looked around at the remnants of my destroyed engagement party, the untouched wedding cake, the unopened champagne, the flowers that still perfumed the air with the scent of promises that would never be kept. "Give me an hour," I texted back. "Then begin cleanup. And pull the security footage from tonight. I want copies of everything." It was time to stop playing the role of harmless, heartbroken accountant. Aella and Reuben had made their choice, and now they would discover exactly what they had chosen to walk away from. The elevator ride to the penthouse felt longer than usual, each floor marking my ascent from Finch Torvin, the abandoned accountant, back to Finch Torvin, heir to a hospitality empire worth $2.3 billion. As the doors opened to reveal my actual apartment, 4,000 square feet of floor-to-ceiling windows, overlooking the city skyline, I caught my reflection in the polished marble entryway. The man staring back at me was done pretending. I poured myself 3 fingers of Macallan 25 and settled into my home office, a space that would have made Fortune 500 CEOs weep with envy. 6 monitors displayed real-time data from every Torvin property across 3 continents, stock portfolios that fluctuated by millions each day, and communication channels that connected me to more power than Aella could have imagined in her wildest dreams. The first call I made was to Marcus Chen, my head of security and the man who'd been discreetly managing my normal life operation for the past 5 years. "Sir," Marcus answered on the first ring. "I saw the ballroom footage. Are you all right?" "I'm fine, Marcus. Actually, it's time to end the experiment." "Understood. What are your instructions?" I took a sip of whiskey and felt the warmth spread through my chest. "First, I want complete files on both Aella Stewart and Reuben Taylor financials. Employment history, social connections, everything. Second, arrange for Reuben's termination from the Nashville property, effective immediately. Third, I want you to personally deliver a package to Miss Stewart's apartment tomorrow morning." "What kind of package, sir? The truth?" After hanging up with Marcus, I spent the next 2 hours making calls that would reshape Aella and Reuben's world completely. Each conversation was brief, professional, devastatingly effective. Call 1, to the owner of Aella's art gallery, where she'd been hoping to showcase her work next month. The gallery operated in a building my family owned, and their lease was up for renewal. "Fortunately, we'll need the space for other purposes. ... Call 2, to the landlord of Aella's studio apartment, also a Torvin property, managed through a subsidiary. We're converting the building to luxury condos. Tenants have 30 days to relocate." Call 3, to the director of the Millbrook Arts Foundation, where Aella had just received a modest grant to fund her next series. The foundation's largest donor had always been an anonymous benefactor, me. "Due to budget constraints, we'll need to reallocate funds. ... Call 4, to the owner of Beans and Dreams, the coffee shop where Aella and I had met, another Torvin property. We're implementing a new business model that won't require part-time artistic staff. By 3 a.m., I had systematically removed every safety net that Aella had built for herself, every opportunity she'd worked toward, every small victory she'd achieved as an independent artist. She would wake up tomorrow to discover that her carefully constructed life was crumbling, and she would have no idea why, but Reuben's situation was more delicate and infinitely more satisfying. more satisfying. I opened the personnel file that Marcus had sent over. Reuben James Taylor, employee ID 47291, hired as custodial staff at Grand Harmony, Nashville, 8 months ago. His supervisor's notes painted a picture of a dedicated worker who always volunteered for extra shifts, never complained about the menial tasks, and was unfailingly polite to guests, despite his obvious exhaustion. What twisted the knife was reading his employment application. Under career goals, he'd written, to earn enough money to return home and win back the love of my life. He'd been working as a janitor at my hotel, cleaning toilets and emptying trash cans, all while planning to use his savings to come back and steal my fiancée. The irony was so perfect, it felt orchestrated by the universe itself. My phone rang. At 4 a.m., the caller ID showed Morrison and Associates, my supposed workplace. Finch. It was David Morrison, the firm's senior partner, and the only person there who knew my real identity. I just heard about tonight. Are you okay? I'm fine, David. Actually, I'm calling in my resignation, effective immediately. I understand. Do you want me to handle the transition quietly? No, I said, surprising myself with the coldness in my voice. I want you to spread the word that Finch Torvin had a complete breakdown after being humiliated at his engagement party and has disappeared. Let people think I've run away somewhere to heal my broken heart. It'll be better for what comes next. After hanging up, I walked to my bedroom and began the process of erasing every trace of humble Accountant Finch. The cheap clothes went into donation bags. The Honda Civic would be sold. The modest apartment in Oakwood would be abandoned. Rent paid through the end of the lease to avoid suspicion. By sunrise, Finch Torvin, the heartbroken accountant, would effectively cease to exist. But as I stood in my marble shower, letting water that cost more per minute than Reuben made in an hour cascade over my shoulders, I felt something I hadn't expected: emptiness. For 3 years, I'd been genuinely happy. Aella had loved me, not my money, not my status, not my family name, just me. When she laughed at my terrible jokes or fell asleep on my shoulder during late-night movies, those moments had been real. When she'd said yes to my proposal, tears streaming down her face, that joy had been authentic. The man she'd fallen in love with wasn't entirely fake. He was just a version of me stripped of external advantages, a version that had to earn love through character rather than checkbooks, and she'd still chosen Reuben. That realization crystallized something cold and sharp in my chest. Aella hadn't just rejected Finch the accountant, she'd rejected the core of who I was, citing that passion and struggle were more valuable than stability and genuine affection. She'd made her choice based on the belief that love should be difficult, chaotic, uncertain, fine. I would give her exactly what she'd chosen. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus, package prepared for delivery. Security footage from tonight has been compiled. Reuben Taylor's termination processed. He'll be informed this morning. Are you certain you want to proceed with the full disclosure? I stared at the message for a long moment, thumb hovering over the keyboard. Once I sent this reply, there would be no going back. Aella would discover who I really was, what she'd really walked away from, and what kind of power now stood opposed to her happiness. Yes, I typed. Proceed with everything. It's time they learned the truth about the choices they made. Hit send. I felt the last vestige of Finch, the accountant, disappear forever. In his place stood someone I'd never been before, a man with unlimited resources, intimate knowledge of his enemy's weaknesses, and absolutely nothing left to lose. Aella had wanted passion over stability. Reuben had wanted to be the hero of his own love story. They were about to discover that sometimes the man you leave behind isn't the victim of your story. He's the author of everyone else's ending. Aella's scream could probably be heard 3 blocks away. Know this because Marcus was parked outside her building when she opened the package at 9:47 a.m., and his report was ... detailed. The package had contained 3 items: a copy of my actual driver's license showing my real address, a printed Forbes, an article from last year titled, "The Next Generation, Finch Torvin Prepares to Inherit Hospitality Empire," and a single key card to the penthouse suite at the Platinum Spire Hotel, the building where our engagement party had taken place, and where she'd humiliated me 12 hours earlier, but Aella's discovery was just the opening act. The real drama began when my assistant, Jennifer Wood, called with unexpected news. "Mr. Torvin, we have a situation. Florence Hayes from Hayes Media Group is demanding a meeting with you. Apparently, she was at your engagement party last night." Florence Hayes. I remembered her, a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s, who'd seemed oddly interested in the evening's proceedings, asking pointed questions about the venue and making notes on her phone. I'd assumed she was one of Ella's art world connections. What does she want? She says she knows exactly who you are and what you're planning to do to Miss Stewart. She also mentioned that she has video footage from last night that you might find ... inconvenient. This was not part of my plan. Within an hour, Florence Hayes was sitting across from me in my actual office, her silver hair pulled back in a power suit that probably cost more than most people's cars. She placed a tablet on my desk and pressed play. The screen showed security footage from outside the Platinum Spire Hotel at 11:30 p.m., 30 minutes after Aella had left me at the altar. The video captured Aella and Reuben in what appeared to be an intense argument on the sidewalk. "Turn up the volume," Florence said with a smile that made my blood run cold. "Told you not to come back." Aella was shouting at Reuben. "I told you 3 years ago that we were finished." "But you left him for me," Reuben replied, his voice confused and hurt. "You chose me. I didn't choose you, you idiot. I chose not to marry someone I don't love. Doesn't mean I want to be with. You either..." The conversation continued for another 10 minutes, during which Aella made it crystal clear that she had no intention of reuniting with Reuben. She'd used his sudden appearance as an excuse to escape a marriage she'd been having doubts about for months, but she wasn't planning to run away with him into the sunset. "Interesting footage, don't you think?" Florence asked, pausing the video. "What do you want?" I asked directly. 20 years ago, your father destroyed my husband's construction company through a series of strategic land acquisitions and permit denials. Robert Hayes spent his life savings fighting legal battles he couldn't win, and he died of a heart attack at 52, still believing he'd failed our family. My blood chilled. Richard Torvin had made many enemies on his way to building our empire. "I've spent 2 decades waiting for the right moment to return the favor to a Torvin man," Florence continued. "Last night, watching you pretend to be a humble accountant while hosting your engagement party in your own ballroom, I realized fate had handed me the perfect opportunity." She leaned forward. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to call off whatever revenge scheme you've orchestrated against that poor girl. You're going to restore every opportunity you've taken from her. And you're going to do it publicly with a full confession of who you are and what you've done. And if I refuse, then I release this footage to every major news outlet in the city, along with a detailed expose about how Finch Torvin, billionaire heir, manipulated a struggling artist into a relationship based on lies, then destroyed her life when she had the courage to choose authenticity over deception." The office fell silent except for the soft hum of the air conditioning. "You have 24 hours to decide," Florence said, standing to leave. "Oh, and Mr. Torvin, your friend. Reuben has been asking some very interesting questions about his sudden termination. Apparently he's not as naive as you thought. He's already connected his firing to your engagement party, and he's on his way here to get answers." As if summoned by her words, my office phone rang. Jennifer's voice came through the intercom. "Mr. Torvin, there's a Reuben Taylor in the lobby. Demanding to see you? Says he knows you're responsible for his firing, and he's not leaving until you explain yourself." Florence Hayes smiled as she gathered her purse. "Like I said, 24 hours. Choose wisely, Mr. Torvin. You can either be the villain of this story, or you can be the man who learned that some things are more valuable than revenge." She paused at the door. "Your father never learned that lesson. It cost him more than he ever realized, and it cost my family everything. Don't make the same mistake." After she left, I sat alone in my office, staring out at the city skyline, where somewhere below, Aella was probably still reeling from the discovery of who I really was. In my building's lobby, Reuben was demanding answers about a game he didn't even know he'd been playing, And now Florence Hayes held a weapon that could destroy not just my revenge, but my entire reputation. For the first time since Aella had walked out on me, I realized I might not be the one controlling this story after all. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "I know who you are now. We need to talk. Meet me at Beans and Dreams at 8 p.m. Come alone." Well, at the coffee shop where we'd first met, where this had all begun. The game had just become far more complicated than I'd anticipated. Beans and Dreams looked exactly the same as it had 3 years ago when Aella had crashed into my life-cramped tables. Mismatched chairs, and the persistent aroma of over-roasted coffee that somehow made everything feel more authentic. I arrived 15 minutes early and chose the same corner table where we'd sat during our first real conversation. When she'd insisted on buying me a replacement, Lati'd apologized for destroying my laptop. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was about to have the most important conversation of my life in a coffee shop I'd just evicted her from. Aella walked in at exactly 8 p.m., and I barely recognized her. Gone was the radiant woman who'd floated through our engagement party in designer silk. Instead, she looked like she'd aged 5 years in 24 hours, hollow-eyed, pale, wearing the same clothes from the night before. She clutched a folder. Against her chest-like armor, she sat down across from me without ordering anything. Her eyes red-rimmed but blazing with fury. 3 years, she said, her voice hoarse with exhaustion and rage. 3 years of my life, and you were lying about everything. Not everything, I replied quietly. My feelings for you were real. Don't. She slammed the folder on the table. Don't you dare pretend this was about love. This was about control. It's about playing God with people's lives because you were bored and rich and thought it would be amusing to see how the poor people lived. Before I could respond, the coffee shop door chimed again. Reuben Taylor walked in, and behind him, to my complete shock, was Florence Hayes. "What the hell is this?" I demanded, standing up. "This," Florence said, settling into a chair uninvited, "is what happens when you underestimate people. Reuben here is much smarter than you gave him credit for. Spent the day investigating his termination and discovered some very interesting connections." Reuben looked exhausted, but determined. "You want to know what I found?" "I found out that the Grand Harmony Hotel where I worked is owned by Torvin Hospitality. I found out that the coffee shop where Aella works is in a building owned by Torvin Properties. I found out that her art gallery, her apartment, her grant funding, all of it, connects back to you." He turned to Aella. "I found out that you didn't choose me last night. You chose to escape." Allella's face crumpled. "Reuben, it's okay," he said gently. "I know I was just an excuse. I've known it since the moment you walked out of that ballroom. You saw me in the lobby and you panicked because you realized you were about to marry someone you didn't love. I was just convenient." The coffee shop fell silent except for the espresso machine hissing in the background. Florence opened her tablet and placed it in the center of the table. "This is the video footage I showed Mr. Torvin earlier today. Proves that Aella never intended to reunite with Reuben. She was simply trying to escape a situation that felt wrong." She looked directly at me. "Which means your entire revenge scheme is based on a false premise. She didn't choose another man over you, Finch. She chose authenticity over a lie." "What lie?" Aella whispered. I stared at the 3 faces around the table. Allella's devastated confusion, Reuben's quiet dignity, Florence's cold satisfaction, and felt something break inside my chest. "The lie that I was just Finch the accountant," I said. Finally, the lie that I was struggling to make ends meet, that the engagement party was my life savings, that we were building a modest, middle-class life together. Allella's face went white. "You mean, ... everything was fake? Our entire relationship..." "Oh," I said, surprising myself with the intensity in my voice. "That's what I've been trying to tell myself, but it's not true. The feelings were real. The love was real. The happiness we had together, that was the most genuine thing in my life." Tears started streaming down her face. "Then why? Why pretend to be someone else?" "Because I wanted to know if someone could love me for who I am, not what I have. Every relationship I'd ever had was contaminated by money. But with you, ... I swallowed hard. With you, I was just Finch. Not the heir to billions. Not the guy who could solve any problem with a checkbook. Just me. And when she chose to leave, Florence, prompted, I felt like she was rejecting the core of who I am. That even without the money clouding everything, I still wasn't enough. I looked at Aella, so I decided to show you exactly what you'd walked away from, to make you pay for choosing chaos over stability. Reuben leaned forward. But she didn't choose chaos. She chose honesty. She realized she was about to marry someone she didn't love, and she had the courage to stop. Even if it meant humiliating you in front of everyone, Aella added, wiping her eyes. Even if it meant destroying her own life in the process. I didn't run to Reuben Finch. I ran away from a lie. The truth hit me like a physical blow. Aella hadn't chosen Reuben over me, she'd chosen truth over deception. She'd realized she was about to marry someone she didn't truly love. She'd found the courage to stop the charade, even knowing it would destroy her reputation and her future. Meanwhile, I'd been living a lie for 3 years, claiming I wanted authentic love while building our entire relationship on deception. Florence stood up and gathered her things. My ultimatum stands, Mr. Torvin. 24 hours to make this right, or I release everything to the media. But now you know the truth about what really happened. The question is, what are you going to do with it? As she left, the three of us sat in silence, staring at each other across a table littered with the wreckage of secrets and lies and good intentions gone terribly wrong. Finally. So what happens now? The answer to Allah's question came at 6 a.m. the next morning, when I found myself standing outside the offices of the City Tribune with a folder containing every detail of my deception, my revenge scheme, and my family's business practices. I had spent the entire night staring at the ceiling of my penthouse, replaying every moment of the past 3 years, not the revenge fantasy I'd been nursing, but the real memories. Aella falling asleep against my shoulder during Netflix marathons, her paint-stained fingers as she showed me her latest canvas, the way she'd light up when I brought her coffee. Exactly how she liked it. Those moments hadn't been contaminated by lies. They'd been contaminated by my inability to trust that they could exist without lies. The Tribune's investigative journalist, Sophie Smith, looked skeptical when I walked into her office unannounced. But 2 hours later, after I'd laid out everything, hidden identity, the systematic destruction of Aella's opportunities. Florence Hayes' counter-revenge. In the video evidence proving Aella's real motivations, she was frantically taking notes. You realize this story will destroy your reputation? Sophie asked. Good, I replied. It should. The article ran 3 days later with the headline, Billionaire Heirs, 3-Year Deception, a Love Story. Built on lies and the revenge that followed. It detailed everything my normal life experiment. The engagement party, humiliation, and my subsequent abuse of power to punish someone whose only crime had been choosing honesty over comfort. But the article also told Aella's side of the story. It revealed her as a talented artist who'd been systematically sabotaged by a man she'd trusted. Not because she'd betrayed him, but because she'd had the courage to stop living a lie. The public response was swift and brutal. #Torvin Revenge trended. For a week, my family's hotels faced boycotts. Business partners demanded meetings. The board of directors called emergency sessions. But something unexpected happened too. Allah's art, which the article had featured prominently, suddenly had a waiting list of buyers. Gallery owners who'd never heard of her were calling with exhibition offers. The Millbrook Arts Foundation reinstated her grant with an apology and additional funding. 2 weeks after the article published, I found myself once again at Beans and Dreams. The owner, Mrs. Chunhu, had remarkably decided not to close after I'd quietly reversed my eviction notice and provided funding for renovations had reserved the corner table for me. Aella arrived right on time, but this time she looked like herself again. Paint under her fingernails, portfolio bag slung over her shoulder, eyes bright with the kind of energy I remembered from our early days together. You didn't have to destroy your entire life to fix mine, she said, sitting down. Across from me? Yes, I did. What I did to you was unforgivable. It was, she agreed. But it was also the action of someone in tremendous pain who didn't know how to process rejection. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of 3 years and everything that had happened settling between us. I need you to know something, Aella said finally. I did love you, the real you, not the accountant persona. The man who remembered I liked extra foam in my lattes, who listened to me talk about art for hours, even though you probably thought it was pretentious, who held me when I cried about my father's cancer diagnosis. Then why? Because love isn't. Enough when it's built on a foundation of lies, Finch, even if those lies were told with good intentions. She leaned forward. You wanted to know if someone could love the real you, but you never gave me the chance to meet the real you. She was right, and we both knew it. I've been offered a position, I said quietly, teaching business ethics at Crescent Valley University. Apparently, my spectacular failure at ethical behavior makes me uniquely qualified to help others avoid similar mistakes. Aella smiled, the first genuine smile she'd given me since our engagement party. That's actually perfect. It's actually perfect. What about you? I heard about the gallery exhibitions. 3 galleries want to feature my work, including one in New York. She paused. I'm leaving the city, Finch. I need a fresh start, somewhere that isn't haunted by us. I nodded, though it felt like swallowing glass. You should go. You deserve everything good that's coming your way. As she gathered her things to leave, I felt compelled to ask, do you think? In another life, where I'd been honest from the beginning, ... double quotes maybe, she said softly. And in this life, the best thing we can do is learn from our mistakes and try to be better. 6 months later, I received an invitation to Aella's first solo exhibition in New York. The featured piece was titled The Weight of Truth, an abstract painting in blues and gold that somehow captured the feeling of revelation. Painful, but necessary. I didn't attend. But I bought the painting anonymously and had it donated to the Crescent Valley University Art Department. Reuben, meanwhile, had used the settlement money I'd provided, along with a formal apology and a recommendation. Led her to enroll in a music business program. Last I heard, he was managing emerging artists, using his experience with struggle to help others navigate the industry more successfully than he had. Florence Hayes dropped her revenge campaign after my public confession. Me destroy my own reputation was more satisfying than anything she could have orchestrated. She sent a single email. Your father never learned that some victories require surrendering. You did. Robert would have appreciated that. As for me, I discovered that teaching business ethics to 20-year-olds was infinitely more challenging than managing billion-dollar portfolios. My students had no patience for theoretical discussions. About corporate responsibility, they wanted real world examples of how good intentions could lead to devastating consequences. I had plenty of those on the anniversary of what would have been our wedding day. I received a postcard from Paris. The front showed the Louvre at sunset. The back simply read, Found my truth. Hope you found yours. I had. My truth was that real love, the kind that lasts, the kind that builds rather than destroys, requires the courage to be vulnerable without manipulation. It's honest without control, and generous without expectation of return. It had taken losing everything to learn that the most valuable things in life can't be bought, controlled, or manufactured. They can only be earned. Up next, you got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.